Hello YouTube, this is a video about PowerShell. I guess you're using ISE like most people, and maybe it's time to switch. I guess we all have been using the ISE, the integrated scripting environment that comes with PowerShell to script away and just do what we need and to debug, sometimes debug, and mostly to just write code and have some highlighting and auto-completion. It's perfect, right? Well, it was until you started to create bigger PowerShell projects, until you needed something like a version control system, or realized that you wanted to work with PowerShell 6, or you wanted more functions like some Azure stuff and so on. So what to do now? Thank goodness there is a solution. It's called VS Code, VisualStudio Code. It's a free environment that allows you to use Git as a version control mechanism. It allows you to run on other platforms, which includes PowerShell 6 running on other platforms. It allows you to do JSON editing, XML editing, HTML editing. If you do some coding in other languages, that works too. So basically, you should switch. So what is VS Code? VS Code is an Electron app, which means it's a Node.js server running a Node.js application and displaying it through basically a Chrome engine. So it's like a web browser bundled together with a Node.js server to serve you your application. VS Code is a full code editor. So it allows you to do IntelliSense stuff, it allows you to do real debugging, also in other languages. It does allow for project-based working, where it simply sorts folders as projects. And it has native Git support. What is Git? Git is a version tool like CVS in the old days, or like Team Foundation Services, but it's more simple, easier to use, and it's free. So let's do this. So here's what I'll do. I'll walk you through installing PowerShell 6, VisualStudio Code, the PowerShell extension that you'll need to do highlighting and stuff like that in VisualStudio Code, and Git, and also including Git in VisualStudio Code. So the first thing we'll do is we'll download PowerShell 6. There's a short URL, I'll put it in the description below, which is akms/getps6-windows. The -Windows is important because you can also get a version for Linux and for Mac. So this brings you to a website that says, well, you will need the Universal C runtime for Windows, on older versions of Windows, not on Windows 10, and so on and so on. To install PowerShell from this webpage, go to the releases, look for most up-to-date package that fits your system. In most cases, that will be win-x64.msi, which is Windows Platform 64-bit. This is release 6.1 of PowerShell, not final, but RC1. We'll speed this up. Now you have the installer for PowerShell 6. Let's just run this. I'll speed this up again. You can enable PowerShell remoting on a server, but you shouldn't do it on a client. It allows to remotely dial into the system. And there you have it, PowerShell 6. You still have PowerShell 5 installed. It can run in parallel. It's called Windows PowerShell versus PowerShell. Okay. Now that we have PowerShell, let's get VS Code. The URL for that is code.visualstudio.com. I'll put it in the description. Here again, you can choose to download for Windows or Linux or Mac. Additionally, you can choose between the stable build and the insider's build. Very often the Insiders build has newer features, and most of the time it is stable. It also does update more often. You choose. I will go for Insiders. So now we have the installer, and we will let it run. So while this installs, let me just recap. It's a full-fledged editor that is basically multi-platform because it is a Node.js server that includes its own, well, browser. That's what Electron apps are. So leave that as it is, unless you want to be able to right-click files to edit them with code. I want that, and so I choose those. And there you have code. So what you need to know about Visual Studio Code to get started. On the left you have navigation. The first one is files. This is where you can open projects as well, folders which are handled as projects. You can open single files. You can search open documents or replace text in open documents. You can control Git or other versioning systems that you have. You can use debugging in supported languages. And very important with this one, you can install plugins. So since we're going to use it for PowerShell, we will look for the PowerShell plugin. So, and it's the first one. It's by Microsoft, and the name is ms-vscode.powershell. That's the right one. You can just press install. And press reload to restart Visual Studio Code, which now enables the plugin. So PowerShell is now the only installed and enabled plugin. So let's test this. I created an empty folder, and I'll just open that folder as a project in Visual Studio Code. Right click into the folder, and since I registered it with Explorer, I can use Open with Code Insiders. Insiders because I use the Insiders build of Visual Studio Code. So you will see Open Editors now here on the left. There's still that welcome screen. I don't want that, so I close it. In PS Test, I can choose to create new files, new folders, or to refresh or collapse that folder. So I create a new ps-test.ps1, which denotes a PowerShell script. And you see it already changes the icon for PowerShell. Just press enter, and it will go directly into the editor for this. The editor includes the text file and the terminal, like ISE would do. So, and down here you can see it's running PowerShell 5.1. You can click to choose to switch to PowerShell Core 6 Preview. So it's restarting the PowerShell in this environment, and now it's running PowerShell 6.1. Let's test the auto-completion and some basic functions. Here I have some PowerShell code for solving a math puzzle. It's nothing specific. So I'll just copy and paste this script into my new editor, and it will automatically start to color and highlight and to format my document. So as you can see, it does allow you to collapse script blocks. It tells you if a function has already been referenced, which means it has already been called somewhere else, and so on. So this looks good. Now you would use the same keys as an ISE for running and debugging, which is just running F5 to run a full thing, which does not really do anything in this case. Or you could highlight a line or something to run F8 and just run the single line in the terminal, just as you would expect. So you probably saw that something happened while I highlighted some text. If you highlight a piece of text, it will automatically show you every occurrence of that text. So let's see what happens about autocomplete, which is most important for many people. Let's see, it lists me all commands that start with invo. I guess I want to use invoke command. And now it offers me different sets of parameters for invoke command, which directly come from the definition of the commandlet. Okay, so I want to use this one and say minus script block, and you see it automatically offers you completions for what you're typing. It also is able to reference variables that already are in the document or in your run space. It automatically adds closing brackets when you do open a bracket. I think you understand, it's just working. So, how about some debugging? Let's say I want to add, at this line, add a breakpoint. So in ICE you would hit F9, same here. As soon as you have a breakpoint, F5 is debugging. So let's run this, and it will stop at that line, and now we see something that you didn't have in ICE. It will tell you the current state of the variables in that run space, and it will give you the call stack, which you normally only have in integrated development environments, which this almost is. So, debugging is nice, much nicer than in ICE, actually. Going back to the files and editing. The nice thing about Visual Studio Code is you can not only edit PowerShell, but it's a generic editor like Emacs or Notepad++. It can open many files. I have an HTML file here. Right click, open in Code Insiders, and you will have an HTML editor. A pretty nice one actually. Visual Studio Code is designed for HTML, CSS, JavaScript and stuff like that, for web development. PowerShell is working very nicely, but it's not the original intention of Visual Studio Code. So you can also use a lot of those intelligent functions for HTML by default. Some other formats that are in there out of the box are JSON, XML, and some others. If you need more, it's always worth looking at the extensions. For example, there's a good Python integration available for Visual Studio Code. The next thing we'll do is install Git. Git for Windows is available at git-scm.com. And well, from here you can just press download to get it. We won't need a GUI for Git since Visual Studio Code will be our GUI. Let's install it. You can leave those as they are. I recommend you leave this one as it is. Basically, it's about those Unix file endings that are different from Windows style file endings and line endings. Just leave them. Going back to my PowerShell project, I can now already start Git from the command line or PowerShell in the editor. So there is one initial configuration you should do. You have to tell Git who you are. So remember, Git is a versioning system. So it wants to know who posted a change to source code. So what you do is you type git config -- global user.email to give your email address. I gave a fake one here. And you will use git config -- global user.name to give your name. You should put your name and email address here, not fake stuff like I did. Now you're ready to use Git. So since I want to basically fiddle around with that PowerShell project here, I will just initialize a Git repository for that project. So what is a Git repository? A Git repository is basically a collection of files in a small folder where you have your sources. So it's really simple to have on a network share or everywhere you can have your source code. That is part why it's so easy to use actually. So how to do this? I have the project open and I go to source control. There are no active source control providers, so we'll choose to initialize a repository in PS test in my folder I just have. Now I have a Git repository and it says, okay, there is one file in that folder that is not yet in the repository, PS test. So I'll just hit the plus sign to stage it, push it into the repository. Now it is a staged change. That means the next time you commit a change, when you push your changes to the repository, it will be uploaded. Normally you have Git repository online or on a file share. That's why I'm talking about upload. Right now it's just a bunch of files in your folder. I'll show you in a second. Let us just finish this by doing our first commit. You just hit the check mark and you're done. So what does that mean? Going back to my project, say I do some changes here, invoke -plaster, blah blah blah, and I messed up. I realize I did something and it's just bad. I changed the number here and oh my gosh, it will never work again because I'll never find that again, that change. It's too small. So, but you already see there is some highlighting at the side, green one for new lines, blue one for change lines. That already is an indicator. You could go, well, do edit undo to reverse that, or you could use Git to your advantage. So there are some changes to this document. As soon as I save it, Git will realize the file has changed. And from here, I can have a look into my changes. I just go to the source control tab, highlight my file, and it will show me the changes since my last commit. And it tells me I now have 2 more lines, the green ones, and I have 2 changed lines. And I can either discard those changes, so basically undo them, or if I like them, if they're the right thing to do, I can commit the file. I'll better undo them. So now we're back to normal. Using a source control software versioning system allows you to work together on large projects with multiple people. That's one reason why we want to use it. Having a look at the folder where we initialized our repository, there is now an invisible small folder .git. If it was a Linux box, the dot in the beginning would already hide it. On Windows, it will be hidden using a file attribute. Going in there, we see some database-like structure. You don't mess with that. It's just files. The Git client handles those. You don't care. You just copy them with your project if you don't use any sophisticated sharing solution. If you have a network share, you have those there. So when you have a file repository on a network share or on a web server, you will use git clone to download that repository to your local machine, work there, and then commit the changes back upstream. So that is, you can have offline copies and sync them later, basically. As a real-life example, we will use Git to download PS app deploy, an application deployment toolkit written in PowerShell and available on GitHub. Let me show you. The website, psappdeploytoolkit.com. I can give you a link below in the description of the video. If you go for download, something peculiar might happen. You're not just taken to a simple download page, but to a GitHub page. A GitHub page is basically a hub from where you can dive into the source code or different branches of that source code. But there's no easy way for you to download it because it says, oh, clone uses HTTPS and gives you an URL, which you can open or download as a zip file, but it's kind of, that's not meant for a browser, right? No, it's not. It's actually meant for Git. So what we'll do, we will just copy that Git URL, which is basically an HTTPS location of a Git repository. Open our PowerShell. Decide where to have those sources. I will just create a folder, PS app deploy. Go into that folder and use git clone command and the URL to download that repository from GitHub. I have a full repository. From here on, I can use the files and sources in here and start working on them. For example, if you're using app deploy toolkit, the most important part for you is gonna be that app deploy toolkit folder. I will use code, which is a shorthand for VisualStudio Code, and point period to denote I want to open this folder in code. Oh, okay. So this didn't work since I'm using the insiders build, so you use code minus insiders in my case. But still, just to show it, if you just type code, you will have it in your start menu. So now it opened up that app deploy toolkit folder like a project, and I can start working from here. One more thing about navigating big files in VS Code. On the right hand side, you will see like an overview of your document. So like you can scroll fast through your document. So I hope you liked that short introduction how to get up and running for VS Code, PowerShell and GIT development on your machine instead of using ISE. See you next time around on TechCrumbs. Sorry for spelling it wrong, but that's my name. Okay, have a good time.